Mr. Smile, company file, stolen company report. In news that makes the world a little less darker, the company has been attacked. Not by the agency this time. An unknown third party probably didn't take kindly to their mercenary practices and decided to wipe out a base. Likely in retaliation to whatever messed up the plot the company was pulling this time. It's all just guesswork because whatever killed everyone at the company base didn't bother doing anything with the archive or the storage, allowing the agency to collect all sorts of files, reports and items that have to now be entered into our own archive. There's a lot of bodies of unique creatures to process, ones that aren't in the agency files. One such body that had a matching company report was one of their managers, Mr. Smile. So while the researchers are examining its body, this writer will share the company file on the creature. Subject 000B32C. Purpose: morale waste disposal. Name: Mr. Smile. Mr. Smile, one of our developed products after years of studying one of our top employees, Mr. Grin. A long-term project in an effort to replicate what Mr. Grin refers to as the void. It's an extra-dimensional volume that exists inside Mr. Grin's belly. That seems to have a storage capacity that can't be measured. Alongside that, exposure to the void seems to be able to strip people of thoughts, emotions, and memories. Things that don't come back depending on the amount of exposure to the void that they've experienced. Mr. Grin is able to bodily consume people in order to expose them, but due to the physical limitations on his body, he can't hold them indefinitely. Likely because when having consumed someone, Mr. Grin himself is exposed to the void as well. Tests have shown that when Mr. Grin hasn't eaten someone, he's actually sealed off from the void. Reproduction of the void in other creatures have failed. Even taking Mr. Grin's DNA and cloning him didn't work. But the clones of Mr. Grin did have their own use, so instead of scrapping the project, we repurposed the clones as Mr. Smile. See, Mr. Smile had a great ability that covered up one of the company's exposure points. What we do with all our failed projects and scrap projects. Oftentimes, we had to dispose of them off-site, and that location had to be constantly changed because the dump sites eventually became too noticeable due to all the mutations the corpses would cause to the environment and creatures. Eventually, these would spawn new creatures that would gather the attention of the agency, something which always cuts into our profit margin and, threaten the exposure of what we do to the public. Our sentries are already overstressed as it is, so Mr. Smile was a blessing for us. While not having a void like Mr. Grin, Mr. Smile can eat almost anything, and unlike Mr. Grin, whatever Mr. Smile ate dissolved and was never seen again. See, his stomach contained acids that very few organic creatures had resistances to. So when we needed a body gotten rid of, calling Mr. Smile will have the creature arrive and ready to eat. It helps that due to the failures in cloning Mr. Grin, our waste disposal technician was constantly ravenously hungry. It was almost painful for him to not be eating. Not that Mr. Smile can express that emotion, what with his face being frozen in a wide smile. Do make absolutely sure that whatever you give to Mr. Smile is not something you're going to miss. Because if you do, you're going to be out of luck. Even dissecting Mr. Smile won't bring what you tossed into his mouth back. There's also the effects Mr. Smile has on company morale. Similar to Mr. Grin, Mr. Smile can up people's moods, even if it's an artificial boost. He's constantly emitting chemicals that have the reaction of releasing endorphins and various other brain chemicals that are responsible for alertness and good moods. It works faster than a good cup of coffee and doesn't have any real negative side effects such as headaches or caffeine drop. So while there may not be any physical dependencies, psychology is another story. But as productivity has risen, it is not really a cause of concern to the upper management. After all, having our employees be happy is okay, but having them be productive and not questioning the many immoral things that we do here at the company, that's amazing. Especially not having to worry as much about the whistleblowers, or forbid, someone talking to the media. Exposure will only hurt us. Though there is a tendency to ignore Mr. Smile's antics because he's constantly making people happy around him. They tend to ignore him, skittling around, constantly getting underfoot, begging for trash or scraps as he does so. Programmed behavior that gets people to remember to empty their waste baskets throughout the day or to discard their lunch containers into Mr. Smile's mouth. Once a week, someone on each floor needs to empty out the fridge and feed whatever food there is to Mr. Smile. This way, a mess can be prevented, or the effort of having to clean the fridge as often as the company had to do. Different creatures with different dietary restrictions are murder to actually arrange. The various mischiefs he does are easy to handle if one remembers that, like most young dogs, smacking him with a newspaper or spraying him with a water bottle will get Mr. Smile to behave. Mr. Grin isn't the only employee we used for the creation of Mr. Smile. Due to the issue of Mr. Smile's lower, childlike intelligence, he was eventually modified, having a regeneration factor installed. The healing factor was very much capable, with Mr. Smile allowing the creature to regenerate from even the most horrible wounds. There is an active component to it, though. Mr. Smile has to will himself to heal. It's not a system that works passively like in others. In return, when Mr. Smile does heal, he does so at a rate that exponentially outpaces the others that have similar augments implanted. He does have to be reminded on a regular basis to heal. Like the others with this package, Mr. Smile has little to no sense of pain. So it's hard for the creature to notice when it's been heavily wounded, a minor design flaw that development is working on fixing. In the meantime, if needed, you could use Mr. Smile as backup to our security forces. He may have a goofy personality, but that can be turned off with a command phrase. The head of security has it on him at all times. So when needed, you can turn this creature into a land-bound piranha that lulls intruders into a false sense of security before getting consumed whole. Please only use Mr. Smile if you're sure that you don't want to know anything about the enemy. Because again, remember, anything that gets into his mouth is never getting back out.